Greetings from Alaska. My name is Fred Roll, Curry Young tribal member from Dillingham, Alaska. Today I want to share an experience that happened with Eric S. Um, he agreed to be interviewed. It's just not going to happen until later on once I'm closer to the area he's at. um, it was near Cantwell, off the Denali Highway, where this particular encounter happened with Eric and his fiance at the time. Unfortunately, they're no longer engaged. So what ended up happening is he had been going to this spot for 24 years, every year, same time of year, never had an issue, ever. Not even Weird Al hoots, none of that stuff. Just standard Alaskan critters, no big deal. So since he's freshly engaged at this point, he decided, you know what? I've been doing this. It's a passion. I'm going to bring her in on it and get her laced up, basically. Get her on board with his yearly routine. He's used to spending a couple weeks every year out there just doing his thing. He not necessarily hunting, but getting out, backpacking, exploring the area, trying to, photograph wildlife, caribou, etc. Just outdoorsy stuff, not necessarily out to kill anything. Although he was armed, um, rightfully so. It's Alaska. Everything wants to get you. So they make it out. They're just south of the Denali Highway on the motorized side. Um, he had given me the place, but when I interview him, I'll let him explain. So what ends up happening is they get there, they get set up, no issues. First couple nights, it's great. She's really digging his Alaskan lifestyle. Now he's an import. He's not First Nations, but an Alaskan. If to me, if you've been up here for a few years and you've gone through the winter BS, you're an Alaskan. Yeah, I mean, that's just. But anyway, so I'm trying to put my mind's eye in his situation. So he's got this newbie to the woods. I think she was originally from Connecticut. Used to the woods there, non-issue. So first couple nights, it's nothing. Well, they go on a hike the third morning. They're on this hike, and they've already hiked that place like 5, 6 times already. In the last couple days, because they just go out for an hour at a time or so, just kind of staying close to camp. The bears were on the move, so they didn't want to necessarily be out too much, but they didn't want to just sit there. So on their excursion, just as they were getting away from camp, just out of sight, third morning, they hear a long moaning groan. It sounded like something really big, basically sobbing is what he said it sounded like. And he said it couldn't have been too far away, but they couldn't pinpoint exactly where, because where they were at, there was a bunch of trees wrapped around, and so they couldn't pinpoint because of how things were echoing around in this little quasi meadow. So he figured, safe bet. Let's just get back to camp. He didn't bring his firearm with him on the excursions. His fiance was against him. He gets back to camp. He gets his firearm out and leans it against the little makeshift table they had there, and they started making breakfast. The moaning ruined their morning. They go on about their way, and it'd been about, he said, 3 hours passed. Now it's plenty daylight. It's not dark and menacing or anything, but all the sound goes away. He said he was struggling to even hear the crackle of the little fire they had going to boil up to make some coffee, some cowboy coffee. So, having dealt with that pressure that just kills all sound, it's different. Some people have experienced it, some haven't. Those who haven't, it's very. You recognize it immediately, but you don't know what it is. You just know it's provoking some kind of fear. He said when that happened, he was in the middle of packing up or cleaning up some of the utensils that they had made their breakfast with just a little bit ago. And so he assumed, it's probably a bear. smelled breakfast is coming in, and they had pre-packaged all their food just to basically warm it up, but it still put the scent of the food in the air. It's not like he was out there frying bacon over an open flame or anything like that. So he gets cleaning stuff up and keeping an eye out, and telling her, hey, just listen for any strange movements in the woods. We want to be bear aware. So she puts on these little bells on her ankles that jingle when they walk. I call them dinner bells for bears. But anyway, people use them and they swear by them that, the bear hears the bell, it takes off, blah, blah, blah. Well, she gets those on, and, they're still around camping. Nothing's too ominous at this point. He doesn't even have Bigfoot, hairy man, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call it, on his mind. It never, not once in the 20-something years he's been going to this place, has it ever been an issue. And that happens for a lot of people. They go year after year, never had an experience. You could tell them your experience, and they'd be like, I've been out there 20-something years, ain't nothing ever happened. You're full of it. That type of thing, which is, hey, to each his own. If some people, if they haven't seen it, they won't accept it. And I respect that. I get that. As they're sitting there and he's trying to explain to her, hey, it's very important that you be on your wits when it comes to the woods, because if there's a bear circling and we don't see it, it may come after you. It may view you as the weaker of the two since you're smaller and pounce on you. So be aware of that. And his fiance wasn't having none of that shit. She was like, screw that. I'm no one's meal. Let's go. He was like, look, okay, I don't want to call it a trip though. Let's just move somewhere else. She goes, okay, we'll move somewhere else. Okay. So they pack everything up, weird feelings aside or whatever. They decide, we'll go down to Swede Lakes, which is further down the Denali Highway going towards Paxson, not too far from the Volcano River incident, coincidentally. Same area. You got to go the same direction to get there. There's multiple trails, but the main one's from that gravel parking lot where the guy ran out on. Anyway, so they make it to Swede Lakes a little later on. It was going on dusk, so they had enough time. They set up and camped out in that parking lot the first night. Uneventful, talking to people coming and going, photographers, whatnot. Having a great time. She calmed back down, was telling everyone, oh, there was a bear, further up towards Cantwell, so we skedaddled down here. And that was, that sufficed both of them, because they really didn't have anything to go on outside of that. Now, it's quite a distance that they went from where they were to Swede Lakes. So no visual, no confirmation on whatever was going on in his original spot, the same spot he had been going to for 20-something years. And so, bear aware, whatever, they continue out the next morning. They make it to Swede Lakes, and once you get back there, it's hard to explain unless you've been there. There's a part of the trail that kind of has this weird kind of zigzag to it, and over the years people have kind of made quasi little campsite areas, and so they picked one of those about 150 yards from the main part of the lake. This is what he's saying. So they get set up, and it's going on into getting dark, and so they got a good fire going and everything's going great. She's calmed down from the bear thing. She no longer wants to run away from the woods. It's his fiance. He doesn't want her to not like the woods, because then he knows he has to make it out every year, and that's just going to create some kind of tension. So he's very happy she's back in it. So when they get their fire going and everything's calmed down, they're enjoying some adult beverages and just relaxing, enjoying. Man, it's beautiful, from what he was saying. It was beautiful out, and they were just enjoying the evening. And on the far side of the lake, they hear that same groaning, moaning type of sound. Same type. Not exactly the same. He said it was a little higher pitched, but it was similar in rhythmic, however the sound went. So that immediately piqued both their interests because they just left the campsite that they were at because of this noise and the weird feeling. So they're trying to figure out, why and what's going on with these weird noises. We were way over there, and now we're hearing something similar over here. And this was late August, and so I'm sorry, 2017. August 2017 is when this occurred. So as they're discussing with each other, hey, what do you think this could possibly be? One of the other campers that was a little further down, he said, was walking by, going to get something because people had parked their four-wheelers up. And he was going to resupply with something. And he asked, hey, did you notice that sound across the lake? And he goes, yeah, it's been going on for a couple days now. And no, we went looking for it earlier today. We couldn't pinpoint where the noise was coming from. But every time we would leave the area, we would hear it again. And so thought none of it. Okay, so these guys have been here unmolested for a couple days with this going on. So we're good. We're safe. They continue around the campfire. They're doing their thing. They're getting to feeling good. And behind their campsite, about he said less than 70 feet, he would guesstimate, they heard a big crack, crack. So that immediately caught their attention. And it was such a loud crack that the campers further down, the same guy that they had seen, came back that direction a little while later asking, hey, what was that noise? We heard that crack way over there. And they're like, yeah, it was about 70 feet back there. And the guy was like, well, hey, why don't we go check it out to make sure that it's not a rogue bear, young male, a little 4-year-old just out causing trouble. We could be prepared, run it off now before we're in bed, and it does it. So he's like, yeah, I'm game. So he gets his rifle. And his fiance wants none of this shit. She is like dead set against him, basically trying to run off a potential issue. She's dead set against it. And he's not feeling that at all. He feels there's going to be some problems because she's not outdoorsy and she's very susceptible to freak out. And rightfully so. I mean, she doesn't know Alaska. She's not accustomed to this stuff. So he kind of... Anyway. So him and this guy, Eric and this guy, they go and they check out the area. And it's on in the dark, so they're using their flashlights, and the one guy had a spotlight. And they're going through and they're looking, and there's nothing to miss. And then they find a broken birch sapling. It was about 3-inch in diameter. And birch is a hardwood, so this tree was alive. And about 6 feet up it was broke. Like someone broke it down and it was laid out. So they're sitting there inspecting it like, wow, that bear must have just stood up on it, pushed or something, and knocked it over. Well, they heard that groaning noise again. That's not bear-like, but it's between them and Eric's tent now. It was real low, real subtle, but they both heard it. Now, they both turn around, and they don't want to have to fire in that direction, so they start flanking to their left. So if they do have to shoot at a bear that they thought, they wouldn't have his tent, his campsite as a back, crossfire in the backdrop, that type of thing, which very smart thing to do. So they're cutting around to the left, and that noise is kind of mirroring them moving off to their right, so that they're kind of making this little bit of a circle thing. And they're like, bears don't typically do that. They're kind of looking at each other like, let's just get out into the open, because they're in some pretty thick brush and stuff. They wanted to get out in the open and give themselves room to see, do whatever they got to do. So as they get back to the campsite, his fiancée is in the tent. She won't come out. She heard everything going on. She heard them talking in the woods because it was echoing right back out to her. And she said, we're not staying here tonight. He's like, look, it's on in the dark. We're several miles from the parking lot to get out of here. Hang in there. We'll get out first light, and we won't. We'll just leave. We'll go back to my place in Anchorage. She said, okay, but first light. As soon as there's a sliver of light, we're out of here. She is full blown not having it, ain't ever gonna come back. She stated as much, and Eric is feeling sick inside because he knows he needs this outlet. He needs to be able to go out in the woods. He's been doing it for 20 something years. He just, it's in his blood at this point. So I don't mean to make light of it. I've lost relationships over similar stuff, being in the woods, and people just can't hang with it. Not everyone's built for the outdoors. Even if they really like the idea of it, in practice it sometimes doesn't work. So this sound, this moaning is still going on while she's complaining about wanting to get the hell out of there. And so Eric and this guy, the guy's like, hey, there's about 5-6 of us over here. Why don't you get your stuff and just come on over, and we'll stay as a group. And his girlfriend, his fiance, immediately chimes in, I'm not going to hang out with a bunch of strangers over some silly noise in the woods. All right. Me, I would have been like, shut up, pack up, let's go with the group. But he wanted to salvage what was left of this little trip of theirs, you know, because they are engaged, and he wants to keep it that way at this point. Well, the guy looks at Eric like, okay, well, you know, I'm going to go get a couple of my buddies. We'll come back. We'll take another look around as a larger group, and maybe whatever it is, we'll get shooed away just by mere, you know, presence of a bunch of people. And Eric's like, cool. Yeah, definitely do that. And so while Eric is fumbling around in his equipment trying to find his handgun that he had brought along with too to holster up and have a second firearm, his fiancée starts freaking out about guns. Like laying into him, like, you shouldn't even have a gun, blah, blah, blah. And he's trying to tell her, hey, look, this is a perfect example of why we need a gun. We got strange noises in the woods. We don't know if it's a rogue bear out to come get us. We don't know none of this stuff. So just calm down. He's getting his buddies. We're going to go and check this out. Well, just as he hears the other group coming from the other campsite, they're talking amongst each other, and some kind of laugh, and, you know, guys camaraderie going on, you know, just coming up the trail back to their site. From the same direction of that break on the birch tree, they hear a god-awful, sound like a woman being murdered, scream. And right after that scream that just pierced their ears and shook their bodies, crash, 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 all around. He said it sounded like someone had some kind of big something and was just swinging it in a circle, and it was like almost like a rhythmic, like whap, 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 kind of sound. And he said it was nothing he had ever heard before. He had never heard that kind of scream, and he definitely never heard whatever commotion was going on. And so at this point, the guys that were coming, they come trotting up, and they're like, what the hell is going on over here? You know, where'd that scream come from? And he was like, right back over where we saw that break. So one of the females that was with the other group came with that party and coaxed his fiancée out of the tent back over to the other campsite. She said, hey, honey, come on. You're not staying here. If these guys are firing off guns, you just need to be over here with the other group, larger number, at least until it's settled. She agreed. So they go and, you know, she takes her away to the other campsite as they're coming up with a game plan. So they've been into the woods already once, and they kind of seen the layout and how the brush and stuff is. So Eric and this guy is explaining he said there was 3 other guys that ended up coming, or 4 other guys, something like that. It was getting on in the dark, and he just saw a bunch of heads, so he was guesstimating, because after the scream, they were kind of discombobulated and kind of like, ugh, which I totally understand. Anyway, so they decide they're going to, 2 groups, only facing one direction. They didn't want to turn, you know, muzzles towards each other if they had to fire. Eric was like, well, if we're in separate groups, that's not really a good idea. How about we're in a line, like search and rescue, and just push through going that direction? Hey, that's a good idea. So they all agree. They're all armed, and most of them have flashlights and whatnot, headlamps, and they start pushing in. And once they get back up to where that broken birch was, well, that birch is now broken all the way off and moved off to the other side. And they did nothing but look at it when they were there just a few minutes ago. Probably half hour, 40 minutes had passed since they cleared the woods. The guy went to get his friends, and all that stuff transpired. So it's well on in the dark at this point, especially in August. Yeah, it was plenty dark. So they're beaming around. They're trying to figure out, what the hell. And they noticed just past that birch tree was a line of smaller alders and some other brush that were just broken off at about 7 feet up. Just broken off. And it appeared that broken piece of birch was kind of swung around like you would a rope over your head, like you go in a lasso, is how Eric said it looked. And he said that's 20/20 hindsight. At the time, they didn't put two and two together, but he's assuming that it was used to spin around and knock the other ones down. I don't know. I didn't see the carnage myself. So they're checking it out. Everyone's looking everywhere. Okay, we haven't heard any movement. We haven't heard anything that's a definitive. It's a bear. Let's get it. Let's move on and let's push it out. Any of that. It was actually dead quiet. Now, when they decided, okay, there's no movement, there's no sound, we're not seeing anything. Let's retreat back and just forget about it. Call it a night. Just as they're getting back to Eric's campsite, another scream. This time between them and the other people's campsite. Now, they're really peaked because they got their women over there. I think there was a child with the other group. And they were, screw that, we're on this. So they run down the trail, they get along, they get to the area of the scream, and they're asking the other campers that are right over there at this point, hey, what direction was that scream coming from? They said it sounded like it was past where you guys were, and they said, no, this scream came between us. And they're like, we didn't hear it that close. So they're just kind of perplexed, like, well, what the hell do we do with that? So they went through looking. They looked as best they could. Not a sign, nothing broken, no tracks, none of that kind of stuff. So things had calmed down for a bit. Now, they decide, okay, it's calm enough. Nerves calmed down. They started doing a little sipping. They felt better about the whole thing, and Eric and his fiance went back to their tent. Now, they get there, and his fiance is wiped out. They get in there. She's immediately in the sleeping bag, snoring, complaining about the bugs. He's tending the fire. He's getting it going again because he wanted to keep some kind of a fire going all night just for whatever that sound was. No one had any idea what that scream was. No one. So he put his rifle away in its case because she was complaining about stepping on it if she had to get up to tinkle. So he kept his handgun nearby. Now, as he was just starting to doze off. He was sitting at the front of the tent with his legs outside of the tent, looking at the campfire, and just kind of leaned back, just kind of staring at and listening to the crackling fire, because it's just a small little 2-man A-frame tent that they had. So he's at the front of it, staring at the fire. His fiance's laid out, and he notices the nylon sound of the tent, like something rubbing on it. So he clicks on his headlamp, and he turns and he looks back, and on the inside of the tent, he sees a huge, huge hand, impression of a hand sliding up and down the tent on the inside, and it touched his fiance's head, and he could see it kind of going like this, and then it moved back up, and then come back around, and then touch on his fiance's head like that again. He said he was hypnotized at this. It was so surreal to see this impression of a huge hand. He said it was huge, moving around. You saw the fingers kind of, moving individually, so it wasn't just a prop, pushed up against there or whatever. So as it slid up, he didn't know what to do. He panicked. He just bam, 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 bam. Put a bunch of shots through the back of the tent into this impression of the hand, right? As soon as that happens, he fired in quick succession and then stopped because his fiance was getting up. Like, she thought he was trying to shoot her. Understandably, she's laying there and all of a sudden, bang, bang, he's shooting over her at this hand impression, right? She's freaked the fuck out, like, hard. And I totally get it. Jeez, being woken up to gunshots from your fiance going over you, it's not a good time. So, and I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm really not. Shots are fired. Loud commotion at the back of the tent, and a bunch of crash, 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 something running away. Boom, boom, boom. Now, his ears are ringing from the gunshots, and he's telling her, calm down, something was trying to grab you through the tent. And she's looking, and she sees the bullet holes, and there's a little bit of blood there, right? So she immediately, she calms down and was like, a bear was trying to get me while I slept. And he goes, it wasn't a bear. It was a big 5-fingered hand impression on the tent, pushing around and touching you on the head. She goes, that's what that was? And she felt it touching her head, but she didn't know what was doing it. She just thought she didn't know. She was quasi asleep, kind of out of it from drinking a little bit, but she remembered feeling some kind of touch on her head. She didn't realize that was it. And so she's in the fog of trying to come to grips with what just happened. He's freaking the hell out because of the sheer size of the hand. Like, he never expected to see anything like that ever in his life. He has not been back out since this incident. So he scrambles to get his rifle out. Now, by this point, the other campers, 3 of the guys are running over with their firearms, coming to see what the hell is going on. Because they heard the gunshots, and then they heard the commotion going through the trees. It was so loud, it reverberated back to them. So they come over, they're all armed. He commences to telling them what happened. They're all looking at him like, dude, you had a little too much, And he goes, no, look on the inside of my tent. They went around to the back, and sure enough, there was splattering of blood. And at one point on one side of the tent, there was kind of like a greasy quasi outline of a hand. He said it was hard to make out, but he knew what it was that made the marks. And they were saying, oh, you could have rubbed your tent against something to make that. They were dismissive of it, is what it was. And he was like, look, I'm not shooting at imagination. Imagination doesn't bleed. And it bled. That's splattering from the outside, and the shots came from the inside. Come on, don't dismiss me like that. Don't mock me. He was very upset. By this point, he's got his rifle out. His fiance is over it, like over it. He's like, she wants nothing else to do with being there, being with him, being near him. She still has alcohol in her system, so she's not quite picking up what's happening. She's going off of adrenaline, over emotional a little bit, and shots ringing over her head, which, hey, understandable stuff. So, this poor guy, he's got the other campers mocking him. His fiance wants to leave him, and he's sitting there dealing with what just happened. There's a lot of that goes on when it comes to these kind of sightings. A whole lot of that. Even people that were together when it happened, one will want to tell people, and the other would be like, that never happened. Why? I don't know. The rest of the night, according to Eric, was uneventful. His fiance never went back to sleep. She had everything packed. And again, he had to make her understand, we can't go until we got a little sliver of light. We don't have enough battery power for the headlamps to make a hike out the multiple miles it is back to the parking lot. So they had to sit there by the fire, and he had to listen to her explain in detail why she was not going to stay in Alaska, and when they get married, he has to move away from Alaska. Just a whole bunch of stuff that he knew it wasn't going to help the relationship one iota. And so he never made it back out again. He's currently down in, I believe he said, Vermont. Again, he's gonna be back up sometime a little later on this fall, and he agreed to tell the whole thing on camera. Hopefully he makes it. The poor guy, he was really busted up about losing his fiancée. He loved her, and this situation just kind of accentuated the weakness in their relationship, because she wasn't outdoorsy and he was. He'd been an outdoors guy for decades, and she was not with that. And so I guess it's for the best that they wouldn't have gotten along anyway. But, the poor guy lost his fiancée from that, And then to be mocked by people that heard the same screams that he did, saw the blood on the outside of the tent. Like, I don't know what causes people to just immediately deny something that was obvious. Like, can you imagine, you saw something, and then someone coming up saying, hey, you're a liar? You're either going to smack them in the mouth, or you're just going to keep your mouth shut and never speak of it. And that's just not cool. It can cause issues within yourself to hold that in. Like, after my experiences for a couple of years, I was self-medicating with drinking. It can lead to a whole lot of unnecessary damage in your life by not sharing it. If you live in Alaska or been to Alaska and had some kind of strange encounter out in the woods, even if it's not visual, maybe it's weird sounds, whatever, feel free to share. AlaskanHairymanProject@gmail.com or NoComp907@gmail.com. The documentary is going to start filming soon. I'm waiting for some information back and some more snow to melt. It was 21 degrees this morning and frost everywhere. It warms up in the middle of the day up into the 50s, but it's still way too cold to be up anywhere alpine. So, all right. Well, thanks for listening, and until the next one.